not approach that door. She's got a shotgun pointed at that door.
Don't make me do this. Dramatic new body camera video of a harrowing shootout. Deputies trying to defuse an armed standoff with a pair of young runaways armed with a shotgun and an AK-47. The 12-year-old boy and 14-year-old girl firing toward officers. The girl wounded when she refused to stop shooting. Tonight, 24 hours after Russian hackers may have launched a ransomware attack against the nation's largest meat producer, we're learning about an attack on the nation's largest mass transit system, who may be to blame for it, and how the White House is responding tonight ahead of President Biden's planned meeting with Vladimir Putin in just 2 weeks. It's been a stressful year, but imagine receiving a massive surprise bill after getting COVID.
To come home and hear on the news, hey, the insurance companies are working with the government to make sure nobody has major bills. And then to turn around and get a bill for $42,000 is like, what the heck happened?
A closer look tonight at the Americans dealing with the overwhelming costs of a stay in the hospital. A major announcement by the NFL. The league is pledging to help end the use of race norming in NFL brain injury settlements, which assumes that black former players start out with lower cognitive functioning. The practice makes it harder for black former players to qualify for compensation for some brain injury claims. The major political shakeup overseas tonight. After a lifetime in government and 12 years at the helm in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu is out as prime minister. The unlikely alliance that came together to oust Bibi, and the shocking rise to power for the man who will take his place. And the stakes could not be higher in a culture war brewing in Colorado over beef. The Ballot initiative that ranchers say could wipe out their entire industry. A report from the rolling ranch lands of rural Colorado.
Do you feel like people don't understand where their food comes from?
Oh, without a doubt. We've lost that connection to from urban to rural.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. It was John F. Kennedy who once said, mankind must put an end to war before war puts an end to mankind. Tonight, a new type of war is becoming more common, and it's not one being fought on battlefields, but it's a war that could have deadly consequences nonetheless. Cyber attacks are increasingly disrupting American infrastructure, and tonight it appears that cyber criminals in Russia and China may be to blame for yet another round of attacks. The nation's largest meat producers slowly getting operations back up and running tonight after it's believed Russian hackers caused production to be halted at all 9 of their meat production facilities. And today we also learned that Chinese hackers may be behind a disturbing hack of the nation's largest transit system here in New York back in April. The MTA tells ABC News tonight at no time was rider safety put at risk, but the incident is certainly raising new questions about transit security. All this comes just 2 weeks ahead of President Biden's planned meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Our Mary Bruce leads us off tonight.
Tonight, news that New York's massive transit agency hacked by the Chinese back in April. Today in Massachusetts, the ferry to Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard hacked by criminals demanding ransom. The nation's largest meat supplier now says their systems are coming back online after a cyber attack shut down all 8 of their U.S. beef plants. The FBI tonight blaming that on criminal organizations based in Russia. The full extent of the hack is still unknown, and it's unclear if the company paid a ransom.
Mr. President, will you retaliate against Russia for this latest ransomware attack?
We're looking closely at that issue.
It's the second time in a month that Russian-based groups have disrupted a major part of American life. The recent cyber attack on the Colonial Pipeline causing gas shortages and panic buying.
They want us to know, as we come into talks with them and with our allies in Europe, that they're capable of disrupting our way of life.
The president is set to sit down with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Geneva 2 weeks from today. With these attacks becoming more frequent, the White House telling me cybersecurity will be high on the agenda.
What are you looking to accomplish when the president walks away from that table when it comes to cybersecurity?
That harboring criminal entities that are intending to do harm, that are doing harm to the critical infrastructure in the United States is not acceptable. We're not going to stand by that.
Today, we asked Biden if Putin is trying to get under his skin ahead of their summit.
Do you think Putin is testing you?
No.
Mr. President, any decision on the $80 million?
President trying to laugh off a very serious question there. Mary Bruce joins us now from the White House. Mary, the White House says that despite these cyber attacks, the summit will go on. Do they still think that it can be productive?
They do. And look, critics say that a high-profile meeting like this only rewards Putin, but the White House insists that the two leaders are meeting because of our nation's differences, not in spite of them. They insist that the president will be pushing Putin on these cyber attacks, which we have seen only increasing. But on the flip side, the president is also looking for areas of agreement where he can work with Putin going forward. It means essentially that President Biden is trying to walk a very fine line here. He wants to be firm with Putin while also try and chart a new path forward. Lindsay?
Yeah, really needed to thread that needle. Mary Bruce reporting in from the White House. Thanks so much, Mary.
Thank you.
And now to the coronavirus. President Biden declaring June a national month of action as he tries to push toward his July 4th deadline to have at least 70% of adults vaccinated with at least one dose. The White House is out with new incentives as vaccination rates climb in some parts of the country but lag in others. Here's ABC's Rena Roy.
As summer kicks off, the effort to vaccinate Americans ramping up.
I promised you we'd marshal a wartime effort to defeat this virus, and that's just what we're doing.
President Biden pushing for more people to get their shots, announcing new incentives, a national vaccination bus tour, plus free childcare and transports for appointments over the next month.
For all the progress we're making as a country, if you are unvaccinated, you are still at risk of getting seriously ill or dying, or spreading disease to others.
So far, at least 12 states have reached the president's goal of 70% of adults partially vaccinated by July 4th.
Let's go into the summer freer and safer. Let's celebrate a truly historic Independence Day.
And with Moderna and Pfizer applying for full approval from the FDA, experts say hesitancy may go down. Currently, both vaccines are only authorized for emergency use in the U.S.
There's been a lot of misinformation about vaccines. I do think getting full authorization from the FDA will add one more level of confidence in some people.
Still, vaccination rates are low in some states like Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana.
I'm a little bit more worried about the South, where last year, right around this time, we saw a spike in cases as the weather got hotter, people spend more time indoors. And unfortunately, because low vaccination rates in the South, you have a lot more people vulnerable.
Our thanks to Rena for that. It's certainly encouraging to see the COVID infection rates coming down in the U.S., but we turn now to the Americans who have contracted the virus and specifically the surprising medical costs and financial devastation that can follow. Here's ABC's Stephanie Ramos.
It's been a little more than a year since 51-year-old California mom Patricia Mason had her life turned upside down by COVID.
I called my daughter up and I was like, hey, tell your dad I need to go to the ER. They knew I had double pneumonia, but they didn't have, I don't think they had COVID tests over at the hospital I went to. And they sent me by ambulance to another hospital.
After a month-long stay in the ICU last March to fight the virus, she was hit with a new paralyzing reality.
To come home and hear on the news, you know, hey, the insurance companies are working with the government to make sure nobody has major bills. And then to turn around and get a bill for $42,000 is like, what the heck happened here?
Was that the first bill?
Yes.
For $42,000?
Yes.
And she's not alone. 6% of adults paid out-of-pocket costs for COVID-19 related medical care between May 2020 and May 2021, impacting millions of people. According to Fair Health, a national independent nonprofit that seeks to promote healthcare price transparency, the average charge for a regular COVID hospital stay is roughly $29,000 to $59,000, depending on a patient's insured status. Those numbers going up dramatically for hospitalizations with so-called complexities.
As soon as you bring in specialists, as soon as you bring in extra medical equipment, more scans, more testing, anything a hospital does is going to drive up the cost simply because most hospitals rely on what we call fee for service, which means whenever they do something, they charge something.
Many Americans had their charges waived through the CARES Act Provider Relief Fund, but some insured patients were not covered.
There was nothing that was done on a national level to let people know whether or not their provider was participating in this program or not. And there's this fight amongst insurers, many of whom said they would leave patients with no out-of-pocket costs for COVID treatment, who are now arguing about whether or not something that's a complication from COVID is still COVID treatment. And that's a really large difficulty.
Families whose loved ones died from COVID left with a dizzying maze of vague and confusing charges.
Sometimes they're coded incorrectly, sometimes they're coded correctly, sometimes the amounts don't make sense, sometimes, you get a duplicate or it's restated or a bill was rejected because it got restated.
Shabam Chandra lost his father to COVID last fall. The 25-year-old says he had to stop working to help his family when his father was sick, and the family has been left with potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in bills to deal with.
It's a constant worry of how are these things going to play out and how are we going to deal with that?
And there is no help in sight. Patricia says her insurance has no cap on out-of-pocket costs. She's tried calling the hospital for help.
I get a bill about every few months, a collection notice, and I call the same lady and I don't get a call back.
What are you guys doing with that bill now?
It's in a drawer. I mean, it's in a drawer. There's nothing I can do with it. I'm just kind of like, it's going to sit there and we're going to figure it out one way or the other. But for now, I can't do it. Mentally, physically, I cannot do anything more than I'm doing.
If Patricia doesn't get help, she says, the debt from her hospital stay will upend her and her husband's retirement plans.
We're in our 50s. Our output is the same as our input, what we bring in, and we work 2 jobs apiece. So what we're putting out every month for our bills is close to the same as what we're bringing in. And it's just not enough.
Often all of these issues come down to a fight between insurers and providers. And then inevitably their answer is put it on the backs of patients. And the patient is the one with the least power in that situation who's going to get the most hurt.
According to the Census Bureau, nearly 1 in 5 households carried medical debt before the pandemic. And some experts fear the fallout from COVID will only increase this rate.
I've talked to people who ended up selling their house because of medical bills, who've had to stay in a job they hated because of health insurance and medical bills. This is not a one-off event. It is a long-term health issue for millions of people, really, across the world. And people in the United States are not only dealing with these immediate medical bills, but also long-term care.
As for Patricia and Shabam and the countless Americans like them, they can only hold out hope that their families and their futures won't be too impacted by these overwhelming costs.
I hope we don't have to pay, but it's been 6 months.
The whole situation is very stressful. It's stressful not to be the same person you were a year ago. It's stressful not to know for sure what's going to happen, but we'll get through it. It's just something that I have to add to my plate at some point in time. And I'm not quite there yet.
One more stressor in an already stressful time. Stephanie Ramos joins us now. Stephanie, what can COVID patients and their families do to try to avoid getting hit with surprise medical costs and out-of-pocket expenses?
Well, Lindsay, health experts say most people look at their healthcare providers as authority figures and don't have the courage to ask those questions and push back. Experts say go ahead and do that. Ask the questions. Don't be afraid to do that, even if it's before the appointment. Lindsay.
Stephanie Ramos, our thanks to you. Next to the chilling body camera footage from that deadly mass shooting at a San Jose rail yard last week, 9 people were killed and the gunman took his own life. In the just released footage, we're able to see the bravery of officers heading toward the gunfire. ABC's Kaylee Hartung is back on that story for us.
On this newly released body camera video, gunshots can be heard coming from inside the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority facility as law enforcement moves in.
Yeah, let's move.
As they make their way up a stairwell,
Hands on your head.
a supervisor is escaping.
Are you able to open that door for us? Okay. Give me your key card.
They enter through the break room, a gun-mounted flashlight lighting up the darkened cubicles as they clear the room.
I got somebody down in front of me.
Finding the shooter, Samuel Cassidy, dead. Those last 2 shots fired by him as he turned the gun on himself. By the time they found him, officials say 8 of his co-workers were already dead. A 9th died in the hospital later that night. As the scene is secured, the camera reveals a bullet hole in a window. Police believe he knew they were coming and fired one of his last shots at the officers. The sheriff crediting the active shooter protocol training they've put all law enforcement through for saving lives, noting the team that linked up at the scene were from 2 different departments, didn't even know each other, but knew what to do.
This protocol, I believe, saved lives. There are over 100 people in that area. He had a lot of additional ammunition.
So perhaps not as bad as it could have been. Kaylee joins us now. Police, sadly, are getting used to these mass shootings. Kaylee, the gunman's cause of death was a suicide, but police say he had multiple gunshot wounds to his head. How is that possible?
Well, Lindsay, that video, if you listen carefully, it helps tell the story. There were 2 shots fired in pretty quick succession just before those officers burst through that door. Authorities say the first of those 2 shots went through the gunman's chin. When that didn't work, he then put the gun to the side of his head and pulled the trigger. That was how he ended his life, Lindsay.
Wow, and you've had certainly some rather disturbing assignments the last few days. Just yesterday, you were on talking about another workplace shooting at that firehouse in Southern California. Do we have any idea what led to that deadly interaction yet?
Yeah, Lindsay, we're learning that there was reportedly a long-running dispute between these 2 coworkers that turned deadly. It ended with the gunman lighting his own house on fire and then killing himself. We're now learning the identity of the victim, though, Lindsay. Torrey Carlin, he was honored at a vigil last night, hundreds gathering in his tight-knit community of Agua Dulce. He was remembered as a dedicated firefighter, also a loving husband and a father to 3 daughters. Lindsay.
Kaylee Hartung, our thanks to you. And now to the major announcement from the NFL, the league revealing that it will support the end of the controversial practice of race norming in brain injury settlements, which assumes that former players who are black start out with lower cognitive functioning. The practice makes it harder for them to receive compensation for some brain injury claims. Here's ABC's Eva Pilgrim.
Tonight, the NFL pledging to help end the controversial practice of race norming. Race norming, critics claim, assumes black players start at a lower cognitive level than white players, making it harder for black former players to qualify for compensation after some head injuries.
I just want to be looked at the same way as a white guy.
Today's pledge coming after an ABC News investigation found several clinicians who say they felt pressured to apply race norms by the NFL, and that when they didn't use them, the NFL would appeal payouts for injuries, often resulting in former players' claims being denied. Today, a shocking admission from the attorney who negotiated the landmark 2013 concussion settlement.
I was wrong. I'm really sorry that anybody, any client of mine in this program has been made to feel that way. That was a big mistake. It was a failure of the system.
2 former players filed suit against the NFL last year, accusing the league of avoiding paying head injury claims based on a formula that discriminates on the basis of race. That case was later thrown out. Those players speaking exclusively with ABC News' Ryan Smith earlier this year. Former Pittsburgh Steelers defensive lineman Kevin Henry says after retiring from the league, he began suffering from depression, memory loss, and bouts of anger. In 2017, he underwent a series of tests, a doctor determining Henry was suffering from a cognitive decline consistent with mild dementia. So he submitted a claim to the NFL concussion settlement program.
What was the result of the claim you filed?
I was denied.
The claims administrator stating that there were issues related to validity of the test and asserted that the evaluation used inappropriate norms.
I'm banged up. I'm beat up. And the part that you don't see is up here. You don't see how my brain is beat up. They don't hit me less or harder because I'm black.
In response to questions from ABC News, an NFL spokesperson continued to assert there is no merit to the claim of discrimination, as the protocols were designed to stop bias in testing, not perpetrate it, but added they are committed to ending race-based norms in the program. Lindsay?
Eva, thanks so much. When we come back, more on that harrowing shootout you saw at the top of the show between sheriff's deputies and a 12 and 14-year-old. The drug test results are in, and they're not so good for the Kentucky Derby winning horse Medina Spirit, as the trainer is already feeling the fallout. But up next, the battle in Colorado pitting environmentalists against cattle ranchers and the proposed law there that could have major implications for how beef ends up on your plate.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source. Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown Hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
It was Gone Girl. Oh my God, the Hollywood story come true.
She was kidnapped, held captive.
I thought it was the end of my life.
He was tied up, left to think the love of his life was dead.
I was afraid that was going to be like the last time I was going to see her.
And just when you thought this true crime couldn't get any more shocking,
all of a sudden, boom, this is insane.
Now, the stunning all-new interview.
All I wanted was to hug my mom and dad. Finally feel safe.
2020, Friday night on ABC.
Take a look at this massive sinkhole in southeastern Mexico that could swallow up a nearby house. Federal authorities are now looking into what can be done to stop the now 230-foot and growing sinkhole from causing any more damage. Now to a culture war that's brewing in Colorado that could put hundreds of thousands of jobs at risk in the state's all-important beef industry. Tonight, ranchers say a proposed ballot initiative could wipe out their livelihoods. Those behind the push say it's about making sure animals are treated the right way. Arcana Whitworth reports.
It's a way of life in rural Colorado. Can you show me around?
Sure.
And for Kenny Rogers,
come on, Fatso.
Yes, Kenny Rogers. It always has been.
So cool. You're there 100 years, and it's like, it feels like it, but.
So your family has been here?
Yes.
100 years?
Yeah.
And now Rogers says everything might be at stake for Wagon Wheel Ranch. When you look around at your land, at your cows, at your horses, do you feel like this is at risk?
No, our livelihoods are at risk. You know, I mean, they're going to take away our ability to earn a living. And with that also comes our ability to feed not only the area, but the state, but the nation, and also the world.
He's talking about a new ballot measure possibly headed to Colorado voters in 2022 that many believe threatens to collapse the state's largest agriculture commodity, cattle and calves.
If this thing should pass, this as far as livestock production in Colorado, it's going for the jugular.
The United States is the world's largest producer of beef, 2.5 billion pounds every year in Colorado. Beef farms and ranchers represent over 30% of the U.S. farms, making it the single largest U.S. agricultural sector. Authors of the PAWS Act, Protect Animals from Unnecessary Suffering and Exploitation, say they want to extend the rights granted to household pets to all livestock.
So I don't really need to convince anyone that it's important to be kind to animals. This isn't about anything greater than that.
Alex Sage, who co-wrote the ballot initiative, wants to forever change livestock production in the state. The measure still needs more signatures to be on the ballot next year.
We have pretty good exemptions or pretty good protections for our dogs and cats, but there's a complete exemption for our livestock, for pigs and cows. And we want to close that gap a little bit in accordance with the popular opinion of Colorado voters.
I just disagree, and they don't understand what we're doing, and just wonder how can we better educate people. What we're doing is not harmful to the animal, and in many ways it's actually more beneficial to that animal.
Leaders in the cattle industry, like James Pritchett, say the vague language in the ballot could have unintended consequences.
That ballot language is pretty ambiguous about how it actually affects practices. In that ballot language, it's unclear if spaying and neutering would be a criminal activity that would take place. If it is a criminal activity and we stop doing that, then we're subject to all sorts of unintended consequences like overpopulation among pets, reduced care for pets, reduced wellness that takes place.
I think our website adds a lot of clarity to some areas where people may be confused, like spaying and neutering is in the interest of your pet's best health, and therefore it's not a contradiction with the sexual act with an animal section of this statute that we're proposing.
Specifically, the bill would expand the definition of sexual acts with an animal, outlawing artificial insemination and castration.
And you view artificial insemination as sexual abuse?
There are standard practices in animal agriculture that are unnecessary and clearly harmful to the animal. Practices like cutting tails, cutting ears, cutting teeth, dehorning, and artificial insemination all cause clear pain to the animal, are all done without anesthesia.
Roughly 85% of dairy cows and 10% of beef cows conceive using artificial insemination. This is a technology used for decades. Ranchers say it improves the genetic makeup of the calf.
Close the gate behind them.
And for Rogers, having control over the breeding process is crucial. He relies on AI for 100% of his herd.
So you would say that artificial insemination is vital to the beef producing industry in Colorado?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. And like I said, there are just so many positives about it. I really don't, other than the time and the labor that goes into it, there just really aren't a lot of negatives about it. I mean, it's a tool in our toolbox that's very, very beneficial.
The initiative would also prevent ranchers from performing castrations on young males in order to prevent reproduction and aggressive behavior, which, according to Rogers, is a necessary step for the animal to enter the food system. Typically, steers are slaughtered at about 20 months old, when they weigh around 1,300 pounds and the beef is tender for consumption.
Colorado voters want to know that their products come from a farm where the animals are simply taken care of, simply on the farm, reproduce naturally via male and female of the species procreating and then giving birth and being slaughtered at an appropriate adult age.
This measure would require ranchers to let the livestock live out 1/4 of their natural lifespan, which they estimate at 20 years, making it illegal to slaughter until 5 years old.
If you're not able to sell and then send to slaughter around 2 years old, you have to keep them till they're 5. What does that mean for you?
Just looking at the costs of trying to keep an animal around, and I'm not even sure how we would accommodate that to produce the amount that the demand has been calling for in the past, it just won't work. It's unworkable.
The Veterinary Association coming out in opposition, saying it would radically redefine common veterinary medical practices as criminal animal cruelty. Adding CVMA, along with other agriculture and animal welfare groups, is gravely concerned this initiative will have a negative impact on animal health in Colorado. But as more than half of U.S. households turn to the growing industry of plant-based options and a culture war between cities and rural areas grows, life on the ranch may never be the same.
Do you feel like people don't understand where their food comes from?
Oh, without a doubt. You know, we've lost that connection to from urban to rural. We just don't understand this attack, and that's, you know, it is that. It is an attack upon what we've always done and have done, and, you know, for the benefit of everybody, I mean, you don't have to, we don't force anyone to consume it. It's always been by choice.
Kana Whitworth, ABC News, Colorado.
Our thanks to Kana for that. Still ahead here on Prime. Could there be an alliance brewing between a member of the Bush family and Donald Trump after all the apparent acrimony? The absurd wait times for people calling an airline looking for help. What can be done? The record number of female CEOs on the Fortune 500 list. We take a look by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day. Major League Baseball releasing this video playing in all ballparks honoring Lou Gehrig.
You've been reading about a bad brag. Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
His words are as timeless as his legacy. Lou Gehrig, an icon of the game, forced.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
Assault on the Capitol, the ABC News original, exclusively on Hulu, now streaming. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for overall excellence in television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
Welcome back, everyone. We turn now to female CEOs. Today, Fortune released its annual Fortune 500 list of America's largest companies. And this year, female leaders broke some all-time records. We take a look by the numbers. 41 companies on the list have women at the helm. That's the most ever. Still, this means only 8% of these 500 corporate giants have female CEOs, but it is trending upward. This year also marks the first time that 2 black women are running Fortune 500 businesses. They are Roz Brewer of Walgreens Boots Alliance and Thasunda Brown Duckett of TIAA. And CVS Health makes history as the highest-ranking company to have a female chief executive, Karen Lynch. The $268 billion healthcare giant is the 4th largest company in the country. General Motors used to have that distinction when it was ranked 6th and led by CEO Mary Barra. And finally, Citigroup's new CEO, Jane Fraser, is now the first woman to run a major Wall Street bank. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight. One of the greatest coaches in any sport is saying goodbye. We have the details. Benjamin Netanyahu's 12-year grip on power may be coming to an end. More on the ideological rivals that could soon share power in Israel. And cicadas. It's what's for dinner, at least in one restaurant. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
guide you through it all tonight. We have made it through another week together.
Big hug,
We tell all our patients how much they're loved. We hold their hands.
David, we're showing our love and support for all the ICU staff.
They're the heroes in this.
It was Gone Girl. Oh my God, the Hollywood story come true.
She was kidnapped, held captive.
I thought it was the end of my life.
He was tied up, left to think the love of his life was dead.
I was afraid that was going to be like the last time I was going to see her.
And just when you thought this true crime couldn't get any more shocking,
All of a sudden, boom. This is insane.
now the stunning all-new interview.
All I wanted was to hug my mom and dad. Finally feel safe.
2020, Friday night on ABC.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
This is GMA3, what you need to know. GMA3.
A third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon.
It's all about you. Lunchtime on ABC.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown Hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Experts say the recent cyber attacks on the world's largest meat supplier and last month's hack on a U.S. major pipeline are exposing vulnerabilities for all companies.
Mr. President, will you retaliate against Russia for this latest ransomware attack? The president is set to sit down with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Geneva 2 weeks from today. Do you think Putin is testing you?
The White House saying it's been in contact with Russia about the cyber attack.
We've discussed it in the past and delivered the message that responsible states do not harbor ransomware criminals.
Today in Massachusetts, officials with the Steamship Authority say a ransomware attack on its computer systems targeted online ferry services in the Cape. And now we're learning the nation's largest mass transit agency was also hit a few months ago.
The hackers breached 3 systems of the MTA, which daily carries millions of people in and around New York City. A transit official told ABC News none of the affected systems impacted operations, and the hackers gained no access to control of subway cars or commuter rail trains. The breach occurred in April when 5 federal agencies were also targeted by hackers linked to China, who had exploited vulnerabilities in a pathway that employees use to connect to their employers' networks. The MTA said it took immediate security steps and no data were lost.
A second test has confirmed Kentucky Derby winner Medina Spirit tested positive for a banned steroid. Attorneys for horse trainer Bob Baffert say a second post-race sample contained the banned substance. A lawyer for the horse's owner says the steroid may have come from a topical ointment and was not necessarily in the horse's bloodstream. Baffert is now banned for 2 years by Churchill Downs. It is likely, though, that the second-place finisher Mandaloun will now be declared the Derby winner.
It's not just you. Hold times with airlines really are getting longer. It could stay this way for months. Over the Memorial Day weekend, callers trying to reach Delta customer service reportedly had to wait up to 21 hours. American Airlines and United say they've been inundated too. So what gives? At the height of the pandemic, thousands of employees were offered early retirements and buyouts. American and others now trying to bring back those retired employees.
Legendary Duke basketball coach Mike Krzyzewski will call it quits next season. Coach K has been the Blue Devils coach for the past 41 years, becoming the winningest coach in Division I men's basketball history. He led the team to the Final Four 12 times, garnering 5 national championships. Sources tell ESPN he'll be replaced by associate head coach John Scheyer.
Less than a month after launching his blog, former President Trump is removing it from the section of the Trump website. Trump senior aide Jason Miller confirmed to ABC News, saying it, quote, will not be returning. No more details about why it was pulled.
Job seekers looking for work at Amazon will no longer be subjected to marijuana screenings. The company announced in a blog post that it will no longer test applicants for marijuana use. That shift in policy comes as a growing number of states legalize cannabis. Amazon will continue to test workers for other drugs and conduct impairment checks.
Welcome back. And next to the horrific standoff between sheriff deputies in Florida and 2 children who ran away from a group home, police say that they had to fire on a 14-year-old girl who came out with a shotgun and fired in their direction. ABC's Victor Oquendo has the images and a warning. Some of them you might find them disturbing to see.
Tonight, our first look at deputy body camera video from an almost unimaginable standoff.
Here's a female has a long gun pointed toward me. Juvenile male looks like he has something in his hand as well.
That's a Central Florida deputy taking cover behind a tree as a 12-year-old boy and 14-year-old girl open fire from inside a house.
Don't make me do this. Don't do this.
The Volusia County Sheriff's Office says the 2 kids, one of them diabetic, ran away from a children's group home Tuesday evening, then broke into the house and armed themselves with the homeowner's guns, including a shotgun and an AK-47. The kids refusing to surrender. The sheriff's office says when the girl came out of the garage, firing the shotgun in the deputy's direction, that's when they shot back, striking her. Helicopter video capturing the gunfire.
They did everything humanly possible not to engage them because they were juveniles. They took gunfire.
Keep your hands up!
The boy quickly dropping his weapon, obeying commands.
Step on that rifle.
The video is blurred as they approach the girl and try to help.
Hey, what's your name, sweetie? Rip it. Come on.
You can hear her crying. Tonight, she's reportedly in critical but stable condition. Once in custody, authorities say the boy told them that the girl said, quote, I'm going to roll this down like GTA, referring to the video game Grand Theft Auto. The girl's father, who currently does not have custody, telling our affiliate WFTV he's shocked.
I can't believe that my daughter had a shotgun and she was shooting at deputies.
All kind of surreal for that girl's father. Victor Oquendo joins us now. Victor, what more do we know about the group home where these 2 came from?
Lindsay, the sheriff says that they were called out to that children's group home 289 times just last year, the home calling what happened tragic and saying that they are temporarily suspending that emergency shelter care program that those 2 kids were a part of. Both are now facing some serious charges, and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement is investigating. Lindsay?
Victor, our thanks to you. And now a development in the case of Derek Chauvin, convicted of murdering George Floyd. In court filings today, Chauvin's attorney asked for a prison sentence of time already served plus probation, while prosecutors asked for a 30-year sentence, arguing that the former police officer acted with, quote, particular cruelty when he murdered Floyd. The sentencing is scheduled for June 25th. Now to the political battle that's brewing in Texas, where Texas Land Commissioner George P. Bush, the son of Jeb Bush, has announced his run for Texas Attorney General, and he's now courting an endorsement from former President Donald Trump, despite the tensions between the 2 political families. Let's bring in ABC News political director Rick Klein. Rick, we often talk about politics making strange bedfellows. So what are the political dynamics driving George P. Bush here?
Yeah, Lindsay, you can't script this. We know all of the things that Donald Trump has said and done to the Bush family. His father, Jeb, low-energy Jeb, we remember so well. Also, his presidential uncle and grandfather. And despite all of those things, George P. Bush, 45 years old, the next member of the Bush dynasty, is trying to climb the political ladder in Texas by embracing President Trump, a wholesale supporter of Trump and Trumpism, even in now pursuing this top job as Attorney General, and he's taking on, Lindsay, a Republican Attorney General who was literally one of the last men standing after the last election, suing other states on behalf of Texas in a futile bid to try to overturn the election results. Despite all of those things, he's got some scandals in his background, and now Jeb Bush's own son, George P. Bush, is pursuing this job, moving along in his political career as an avowed Trump supporter. It is really a strange set of circumstances, but for one person that's very happy about it, you got to look at Donald Trump. He's got both candidates vying for his support, and he has indicated he will endorse.
The Thanksgiving dinner table will be quite interesting in the Bush household. It seems like this just shows the continued hold that President Trump has over the Republican Party at all levels, even after his recent political failures.
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, look, George P. Bush is someone that's been talked about as a rising star in Republican politics for more than 2 decades. And the fact that he, of all people, would feel like he needs to cozy up to President Trump with the best Rolodex and the best political name one can imagine in Texas, where his family's political roots are very, very long and deep. The fact that even he feels like there's no room away from Donald Trump tells you just about everything you need to know about the Republican Party today.
Rick Klein, our thanks to you. From the political positioning here at home to the political battle overseas in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's current 12-year grip on power may soon be coming to an end. Let's bring in our senior foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell. Ian, the coalition that could take over is a strange mix, but they seem to have one thing in common. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. It's a very strange mix. I mean, it literally spans the spectrum from far left to far right, and also from Arab Israeli to Jewish Israeli. So, yes, there are a lot of different views there, but this was primarily about a Get Bibi campaign. Get out. Prime Minister Netanyahu, who's been in power 15 years overall, but certainly has been in office for the last 12 years. He's Israel's longest-serving prime minister. He's the face of Israel for many of us who live overseas. He's represented Israeli foreign policy. He's certainly represented Israel in terms of Middle East policy, but he has become increasingly unpopular. He's also been under legal problems. He's faced charges of corruption, fraud and bribery. Those charges are still there. They may well accelerate. He was trying to get parliamentary immunity. That, of course, is not now going to happen. But there's still a parliamentary process that has to get underway, whereby this vote, this agreement, this coalition government has to be ratified. That's going to take place probably in the next week to 2 week period. It looks as though all the members of the coalition will agree to that, but if only one member of those parties, and this is how fine the coalition is, decides not to agree to the new coalition forming a government, then potentially we go back to a 5th election in really over the last 12-month period.
And, of course, so many are wondering if those stalled peace efforts between the Israelis and Palestinians can ever be revived. Talk to us more about who the next leader of Israel could be and the fact that that position may alternate.
Yeah, I think, and this is why it's important to stress that this has been primarily a campaign to try and remove Benjamin Netanyahu from power, because what I don't think we're going to see in terms of the international stage, in terms of foreign policy, is any substantial change. So there's a 4-year term for the new government. The first 2 years are going to be held by Naftali Bennett, who used to be a close aide to Benjamin Netanyahu, who himself has described himself as further to the right than Netanyahu. For example, he believes that the West Bank, East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights should all be part of Israel. He doesn't believe in the two-state solution, and he also is an advocate of settlements, the expansion of settlements into Palestinian territory, which again is against international law. So in many positions, he's much more hardline, but he's probably going to have to temper that, because the real kingmaker here is Yair Lapid, who takes over the second 2 years. His bloc got the majority bloc in the last election, something like 18 seats. He is a much more of a moderate. He believes in the two-state solution. And I think the question is, and we always see this with Israeli politics, because it's always proportional representation, there's always tight coalition governments, how much he's able to influence the policies of the new government and how much Naftali Bennett is. All of them must have made concessions, significant concessions. We're seeing the presence of an Arab Islamist party in the coalition government. The first time that's ever happened. This is about trying to boost representation for Israeli Arabs. That's also absolutely key. So it's going to be a fascinating period, but you're also going to see Benjamin Netanyahu in opposition, and we know he's not going to go quietly. The new government is going to be essentially only have a wafer-thin majority, and you would imagine that Netanyahu is going to try and do his damnedest to try and unseat it and force yet another election. Lindsay?
Yes, it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out. Ian, panel, our thanks to you. Now to that dramatic rescue at sea caught on camera. A little girl swept half a mile from the shore in a rubber dinghy after strong winds detached the line connecting her to her family back on shore. ABC's Alex Perez has this story.
Pull up down there. Come on, sweetheart.
A heart-racing rescue at sea caught on tape just off the coast of Wales. This young girl on a rubber dinghy swept out to sea by strong winds about half a mile away from her family. She was connected by a safety line to a loved one, but the powerful gust detached the line.
You okay? You're all right?
Complete chaos until this volunteer lifeboat crew steps in to save the day.
We'll get you back to your parents, yeah?
Okay. The girl safely reunited with her family unharmed. The horrifying scenario has happened before. Listen to this 2019 call from a beach in North Carolina. Mom Jill O'Connor frantically trying to get help for her young son.
My son is floating out in the middle of the ocean on a floaty thing.
Her son, just 8 years old at the time, Declan O'Connor, rescued from this unicorn floaty.
I was really scared and thinking like I might die.
Made for fun times, but one wrong move or mishap on an inflatable can quickly lead to a terrifying incident like these. With summer upon us and more people heading to the water, experts warning parents always be on guard.
The ones that cause the most trouble out here are the giant unicorns and cartoony multiple person flotation devices that get out of control. It's equal parts choosing the right device or avoiding the obviously inappropriate devices.
Parents have to be extra vigilant at this time of year. Our thanks to Alex. For some parts of the country, cicadas are out now in full force, and while many are trying to avoid them, one Brooklyn chef is kind of bugging out and trying to get his hands on as many of them as he can. Will Gans explains for the culinary curious.
It's been called the cicada tsunami.
I should have brought my saxophone.
But it's music to Joseph Yoon's ears.
I can hear two different types right now.
Cicada brood X out and about for the first time in 17 years.
Hundreds of billions of them are emerging all at one time. If not, some use a T word, trillion.
So forget farm to table.
Right now, I'm just trying to get healthy ones and discarding the ones that have the fungus on it.
Now it's all about forest to table.
They're creepy, they're definitely crawly, but how do they taste? Let's hit the kitchen to find out.
Chef Yoon is a man on a mission to bug us all about the benefits of insect protein.
1, super cool. 2, super delicious. 3, it's sustainable. 4, it's nutrient dense. I'm not saying this is like the silver bullet, let's save the world by eating bugs, but even if we were to do it once a week, even that would have a great impact on the environment.
Good for the environment and good on the menu? Let's find out. On today's menu, an Italian dish with all the fixins.
We're gonna add the peppers, the fennel, and the leeks.
And a couple minutes later,
now we're gonna add the adult cicadas.
One of Joe's top tips when it comes to cooking with insects, make sure you're creeping it real.
Instead of trying to think of a completely new dish that you've never made before, why don't you go with one that's in your wheelhouse? If you are a mac and cheese expert, why don't you add some cicadas into your cheese sauce?
For us, some ricotta, our sauteed veggies and cicadas into a pasta noodle.
That's amore.
That's cicada.
And then,
now you see it, now you don't. Well, can I ask you something?
In a minute.
Do you enjoy my food?
Enjoy is not enough of a word. It's so delicious.
Chef also preparing some cicada nymphs into a shishito pepper sauce over rice, and a tofu option.
And the cross textures between the bug has a little bit of crunch.
But this reporter is an easy sell. How about our intrepid crew?
We're putting Angelica and Gentrix to the test.
Bug appetit, guys. Yeah.
I don't know. It's not bad.
In pasta over rice over tofu, proof that insect protein doesn't need to be reserved for fear factor.
Bug appetit. Bug appetit.
I just can't see how he did that. Will is a brave man. Our thanks to him for that. And the FDA is warning people to not eat cicadas if they are allergic to seafood because they share a relationship to shrimp and lobsters. I'm sure there are lots of other reasons to not eat cicadas as well. Before we go tonight, our image of the day, the Energy Secretary and the agency's chief of staff raising the pride flag outside the agency's headquarters. He is the first person of color, Indian American, and first openly LGBTQ person to ever have his job at the DOE. And that is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Coming up in our next hour, we're staying on top of several things. More on that major announcement by the NFL, the league pledging to end the use of race norming, which made it harder for black athletes to qualify for compensation for brain injury claims. And with online shopping's now firmly a thing, porch pirates have been increasingly brazen, but now several states are planning a crackdown.
It was Gone Girl. Oh my God, the Hollywood story come true.
She was kidnapped, held captive.
I thought it was the end of my life.
He was tied up, left to think the love of his life was dead.
I was afraid that was going to be like the last time I was going to see her.
And just when you thought this true crime couldn't get any more shocking,
all of a sudden, boom, this is insane.
Now, the stunning all-new interview.
All I wanted was to hug my mom and dad. Finally feel safe.
2020, Friday night on ABC.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
There's a sense of pride when I look at the black families that were in towns like Tulsa.
The white population burned the whole town down.
100 years ago, there were race riots and massacres across the country.
In telling the story of what happened, we can understand what we have come through. This idea that we will make America what it was, no, no, no. We will make America what she should be.
Guys, let's celebrate. We finally live together, and I want to make it official.
This is my time to take risks.
Everyone looks at divorce as an ending, but I think that it's an opportunity.
She thinks we still have feelings for each other.
You got this. Thank you for being here.
Like savages.
Freeform's The Bold Type. Final season now streaming. New episodes Thursdays.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
Seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
But to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty. Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this. It's the time of suspicion. The ending's really tough. You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown Hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We're monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour. With time running out, our bipartisan infrastructure deal, President Biden sat down with West Virginia Senator Shelley Moore Capito. She was one of the Republicans who brought forward a GOP counter $1 trillion proposal, less than the $1.7 trillion the White House is seeking. The West Virginia lawmaker says she plans to talk with her fellow Republicans and connect back with the president on Friday. We're seeing chilling new body camera footage from the deadly mass shooting in San Jose last week. Deputies and police officers running toward the gunfire with at least one bullet fired in their direction before the gunman turned the weapon on himself. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's 12-year grip on power may be coming to an end. His opponents announced a power-sharing deal just minutes before a deadline that would have forced the fifth straight election in the last 2 years. Under the agreement, two leaders will split power, and a small Islamist party will become the first Arab party to ever join the governing coalition there. Netanyahu's ouster will become official once the Knesset, Israel's power, holds a vote in the coming days. And now to the coronavirus. President Biden declaring June a national month of action as he tries to push toward his July 4th deadline to have at least 70% of adults vaccinated with at least one dose. The White House is out with new incentives. About 12 states have already achieved that goal. Hawaii is at 80%, but 7 states have less than half of adults with at least one dose, meaning that millions are still at risk. ABC's Stephanie Ramos has the details.
In a push to get more Americans vaccinated, President Biden today announcing a national month of action to help the country reach his goal, 70% of adults with at least one dose by the 4th of July.
America's headed into a summer dramatically different from last year's summer. A summer of freedom, a summer of joy, a summer of get-togethers and celebrations.
The president unveiling new incentives like free childcare at major daycare chains and some YMCAs while parents get the vaccine or recover from it. Overnight hours at pharmacies on Friday nights in June. The White House teaming up with Black-owned barbershops and beauty salons to reach more Americans and touting a blitz of new rewards like free sporting tickets and, if the country reaches the president's goal, free beer from Anheuser-Busch.
Get a shot and have a beer. Free beer for everyone 21 years or over to celebrate the independence from the virus.
12 states have already met the president's goal, but another 6 states have yet to even reach half of their adult population with one shot. Deaths from COVID are now averaging 383 a day, but the president warns they are not falling in places where vaccinations are lagging.
If you're thinking that the side effects from the shot are worse than the COVID, or that you can't just take a chance, you're just dead wrong.
This hospital in Louisville, Kentucky is still caring for COVID patients.
We are still seeing COVID patients that are very, very ill, but those patients that we're seeing are unvaccinated, and unfortunately, some of the patients that we're seeing are younger, more in the age range of the 40s to 50s.
And experts warn variants like the ones from the UK and India are still a threat.
We do have these variants that are spreading, and there's a couple that are particularly contagious. So it's a particularly dangerous time to be unvaccinated at this moment.
Tonight, the president urging Americans to pull together and get the vaccine.
We need everyone across the country to pull together to get us over the finish line. I promise you, we can do this.
Our thanks to Stephanie for that. And now to that cyber attack crippling one of the largest meat producers in the world. JBS Foods temporarily forced to bring all of its U.S. beef plants to a halt at a time when meat demand is at its highest. As of today, JBS says all of its plants will be back online as of tomorrow. ABC's Ike Ejachi has the latest.
The U.S.'s second largest provider of meat, JBS, getting back online from a cyber attack. The company alerting the White House they shut down all 9 U.S. beef production plants, along with ones in Canada and Australia, after an attack believed to be carried out by hackers inside of Russia. The White House saying it's been in contact with Russia about the cyber attack.
And we've discussed it in the past and delivered the message that responsible states do not harbor ransomware criminals.
Press Secretary Jen Psaki saying it's the job of private companies to shore up blind spots that make them susceptible to hackers, but that it's Russia's responsibility to handle rogue cyber criminals, and that the U.S. won't stand still.
We're not taking any options off the table in terms of how we may respond.
Wednesday, the meat producer declaring significant progress in the recovery effort, saying the vast majority of our beef, pork, poultry, and prepared foods plants will be operational. The attack comes just as beef usage nears a seasonal high, with summer celebrations and Independence Day around the corner, an issue economists say could raise prices.
Retailers don't like to raise prices on consumers if they don't have to, especially with these short-term shocks. So they're going to try their hardest, and they're going to work to absorb any potential increase.
Consumers certainly don't like to have to pay those higher prices either. Our thanks to Ike Ejiochi for that. Now to the major announcement from the NFL, the league revealing that it will support the end of the controversial practice of race norming in brain injury settlements, which assumes black former players start out with lower cognitive functioning. The practice makes it harder for them to receive compensation for some brain injury claims. Here's ABC's Eva Pilgrim.
Tonight, the NFL pledging to help end the controversial practice of race norming. Race norming, critics claim, assumes black players start at a lower cognitive level than white players, making it harder for black former players to qualify for compensation after some head injuries.
I just want to be looked at the same way as a white guy.
Today's pledge coming after an ABC News investigation found several clinicians who say they felt pressured to apply race norms by the NFL, and that when they didn't use them, the NFL would appeal payouts for injuries, often resulting in former players' claims being denied. Today, a shocking admission from the attorney who negotiated the landmark 2013 concussion settlement.
I was wrong. I'm really sorry that anybody, any client of mine in this program has been made to feel that way. That was a big mistake. It was a failure of the system.
2 former players filed suit against the NFL last year, accusing the league of avoiding paying head injury claims based on a formula that discriminates on the basis of race. That case was later thrown out. Those players speaking exclusively with ABC News' Ryan Smith earlier this year. Former Pittsburgh Steelers defensive lineman Kevin Henry says after retiring from the league, he began suffering from depression, memory loss, and bouts of anger. In 2017, he underwent a series of tests, a doctor determining Henry was suffering from a cognitive decline consistent with mild dementia. So he submitted a claim to the NFL Concussion Settlement Program.
What was the result of the claim you filed?
I was denied.
The claims administrator stating that there were issues related to validity of the test and asserted that the evaluation used inappropriate norms.
I'm banged up. I'm beat up. And the part that you don't see is up here. You don't see how my brain is beat up. They don't hit me less or harder because I'm black.
In response to questions from ABC News, an NFL spokesperson continued to assert there is no merit to the claim of discrimination, as the protocols were designed to stop bias in testing, not perpetrate it, but added they are committed to ending race-based norms in the program. Lindsay?
Our thanks to Eva for that. And for more on this, let's bring in USA Today columnist and ABC News contributor Christine Brennan. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us. Just explain the significance of this decision by the NFL to pledge that race norming won't be used in the brain injury settlements.
This is a significant victory, Lindsay, for the players, especially the black players. And the league is 60% black now. More than half of all the retirees are black. And to think that there was the assumption that blacks start, with a worse cognitive function and a score, kind of a baseline. So, of course, that means it's harder for them to show there's a deficit and win awards. And so what the NFL is saying, they're going to go back and look at all of those that may have been in question and try to get those awards taken care of. This is a big victory for those players. It is a look at history that is ugly, and obviously the NFL does not want to be a part of that anymore. And they are going to go and look at this. The NFL's spokesperson, Brian McCarthy, said retroactively they'll be going back. The players fought this for several years, their wives, and they really, there was civil suit, there were petitions. The judge was looking at it again. And today the NFL said, we were wrong, and we're going to go back and try to do this right.
And just to be clear, when you say that they're going to go back, does that mean that they're going to go back and pay all of these players who they'd previously denied their claims?
What the NFL is saying is that they are going to go and have a panel, which would include several Black doctors and several women doctors, which is good news for the players who have been very suspicious, understandably, of what the NFL is doing, and reevaluate those cases. So the idea that the deficit was so low that there would then be not an award for those Black players, these are retirees, of course, we're talking about, with some CTE or cognitive function issues. They will go back and look at those and evaluate whether the decision originally was right or wrong. And if it was wrong, they will then give those players the award that they deserve, as opposed to getting nothing, as was the case with many of them.
How do you feel like this fits into the larger conversation that this country has been having on issues of addressing issues of systemic bias?
Absolutely. That you cannot take this story out of our larger context, Lindsay, of our culture and where we are right now. As I mentioned earlier, the NFL is 60% Black. Black Lives Matter, all of the issues that we've been talking about in the last year, obviously they're different issues. It's not the same as concussions, but it is still part and parcel of the same national conversation. And it is really wonderful to see what has happened, an awareness of these issues, that these Black lives are, and these men who have toiled for years in the NFL and been cheered by fans, they do deserve this second look. And I think it is the NFL, especially as a bellwether, as our biggest pro sports league, as the league that is by far the most popular. They could not do something in this climate at this time in 2021, where there's a sensitivity, absolutely correctly so, about issues that for so many years were ignored.
And do you feel like it's way overdue?
Oh, this is absolutely way overdue. This idea of this race norming was apparently in the 1990s. And it's really stunning. I'm sure many people, this might be the first they're hearing of it. And it's like, wait a minute, this was actually happening. And this was then depriving these men who are dealing with such cognitive dysfunction, and whether it's Alzheimer's or other memory issues because of concussions, because of CTE, because of the way the NFL treated head injuries back in the day. It was not right. It wasn't good. And to think that this has been going on, and they've had to fight this fight and fight for several years to do it. And it's a big victory. It's a big victory for them. And it's a big victory, I think, for anyone who cheers for the NFL, to look at these players and these heroes from the past and say they deserve this. They deserve to have to get more. They deserve at least a second look, to be evaluated the same as their white counterparts.
Former NFL running back Ken Jenkins responded to the NFL's decision by saying, words are cheap, let's see what they do. The NFL has a complicated history on handling former player claims. Did the public pressure force this change, would you say? Or was it just a matter of it's 2021 and this so-called racial reckoning that's been happening in the past year?
Lindsay, I think it was a little bit of both. Certainly, we're more aware of issues that we should have been aware of a long time ago, but at least we're aware of them now. So I think that's a piece of it. And then I think also it was pressure. There were 50,000 petitions that were delivered. The judge said that she wanted to look at this again. You had a civil lawsuit from two of the players. You had real pressure being put on about the inherent unfairness of this system that was depriving these Black players of the same kind of award as white players were getting for basically the same injury. And it just didn't seem right. So I think there was pressure. And even though maybe most fans haven't spent that much time thinking about this, when you hear about it, when you look at the headlines, when you actually read what's happening, the NFL is changing course today. They are saying enough is enough. They're going to do business now in a different way. It certainly makes sense that there was pressure, that it was wrong. The NFL and those around the NFL now realize that, and they're moving forward in a different way. And I think it's a victory for those players. These players, again, who have been wanting to get some money, wanting to be able to have better lives, even as they've been fighting these very debilitating diseases of head injury, brain trauma, and Alzheimer's and other diseases like that.
And as you know, Christine, the NFL has long been under scrutiny over its handling of concussions and their long-term impact on players. How have they changed their approach in recent years on that issue?
In the last 10 years, Lindsay, they have been doing better. Frankly, they couldn't have been doing worse for the longest time. The old days of just telling a guy, go back in there, you got your bell rung. And for the number of times I quoted a coach, in the 80s and 90s saying, oh, he got his bell rung. He went right back in there. How horrifying that sounds now. And so there are independent observers. There are procedures. You can't just have a player go right back in the game, say, I'm fine. Of course, the players always say they're fine. The coach can't just send a player back in. There are independent observers. There's a protocol. They must go through it. No one just runs back on the field. It's much more based on observation by medical experts as opposed to the coach telling a player, as they did in the old days, to just go back out there and tough it out. And that's good. It's still a very violent game. It's still a game that is very concerning, and especially for kids who are playing that football, of course, other sports as well. Head injuries are a big conversation now, but I think because of the last 10 years, the concussion movie, all the work by Boston University with its research, I think there's more of an awareness now, and that has obviously trickled up to the National Football League in terms of the way they treat these concussions, especially with independent and medical observation, where, again, just a coach cannot tell a player to go back into the game.
The triple up effect at work. Christine Rennan, thank you always for your time and your insight.
Lindsay, thank you.
As online shopping skyrocketed during the pandemic, unfortunately, so did package thefts. And now some states are proposing new legislation to crack down on porch pirates. Becky Worley has more.
This seems like a normal delivery. A woman pulling into the driveway in Huntersville, North Carolina, grabbing a package from this delivery driver. Only problem is, authorities say this isn't her house. The woman puts the package in her car and drives away with a brand new laptop. Police still looking for the suspect.
There's been an increase in package thefts, primarily because there's been more deliveries. They seem to be getting a little more creative.
A man dressed like an Amazon delivery driver accused of stealing packages. Trey Dodge of Philadelphia caught the suspected porch pirate on his home security camera.
I quickly looked and I was like, oh, it looks like just Amazon. But then I realized he was undelivering the packages.
Police later arrested the man and levied multiple charges against him, including 3 counts each of theft and receiving stolen property. As Americans shop online more than ever, experts say porch pirates are seeing an opportunity. More deliveries, and while we've been home more during the pandemic, experts say we're just not checking the front door as often. Now, lawmakers are taking action.
So there's been a lot of movement recently to either expand state legislation to be able to include things like deliveries from all common carriers, not just the Federal Postal Service, and also potentially to increase some penalties for porch piracy.
According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, 19 bills for more strict laws regarding mail and package theft are on the docket during the 2021 legislative session. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp signing into law that repeat package theft offenders in the state would now be subject to a felony, and conviction would carry up to 5 years in prison. But Stickles says homeowners should also make changes.
If you can conceal a package or remove the amount of time that it's exposed to someone, that seems to be key to reducing this issue.
Some good old-fashioned news you can use there. Our thanks to Becky for that. And still to come, Iran's largest warship catches fire and sinks. What's being blamed for that incident? Stay with us.
It was Gone Girl. Oh my God, the Hollywood story come true.
She was kidnapped, held captive.
I thought it was the end of my life.
He was tied up, left to think the love of his life was dead.
I was afraid that was going to be like the last time I was going to see her.
And just when you thought this true crime couldn't get any more shocking,
all of a sudden, boom, this is insane.
Now, the stunning all-new interview.
All I wanted was to hug my mom and dad, finally feel safe.
2020, Friday night on ABC.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown Hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Welcome back. We are tracking several international headlines at this hour. That cargo ship fire in Sri Lanka that we've been talking about over the past 13 days has now turned into an ecological disaster. The ship is now sinking as a tugboat pulls it away from shore. Oil, toxic chemicals, and plastic have been pouring into the water and washing up on some nearby pristine beaches, threatening wildlife. A criminal investigation into the incident continues. In Iran, officials are dealing with the fallout from its largest warship catching fire and sinking. According to Iranian news sources, the fire broke out in an engine room during a training mission. Some 400 sailors and cadets were on board at the time, and all were rescued. And COVID cases in our part of the world continue to surge, continue to go down. 1.1 million new cases and more than 20,000 died in the America in the last week. The U.S., Canada, and Mexico are all reporting a drop in cases and deaths, although hotspots are being reported in Mexico near the popular resorts of Cancun and Tulum, as well as Tijuana. This Pride Month, we celebrate the triumphs of the LGBTQ community and also recognize its struggles. And we're joined tonight by Dr. Paula Stone Williams, a transgender pastor and counselor at the Left Hand Church and the former CEO and editor of the church planting organization, the Orchard Group. Her new book, As a Woman, What I Learned About Power, Sex, and the Patriarchy After I Transitioned. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Dr. Williams.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you.
And you write, quote, "The heart yearns to be free, but it will never be free until you let go of the world to which you no longer belong." Explain what you mean by that.
I think there is a tendency to try to hang on to safety instead of accepting that we've all been called on the hero's journey. And it always means a trip onto the road of trials, and no one willingly goes onto the road of trials. But when you realize it is the path you need to take, you finally say, yes, I'm willing to go that direction. And I think that's when we let go. Most of us want to not let go of one hand until we're already holding onto the one in front of us. And the truth is you have to let go of one before you find the other.
And you write about what you learned while becoming a woman that you never realized as a man. For example, you say that you started second-guessing your instincts and that women are taught to be perfect, not confident. Tell us more about what else surprised you about womanhood.
You know, one of the things that surprised me is how much women do not empower one another. Men do tend to empower one another, I think. They come into a room, they look to see who the alpha is in the room, they rank themselves accordingly, and then they set about accomplishing the purposes of the alpha. Or to use a sports analogy, they get in a huddle, slap each other, and then they advance the quarterback and the ball down the field. Too often, I think women see each other as competition, and I get it because only 5.8% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women, 6.6% of Silicon Valley CEOs. Women earn 79 cents in the dollar on average of what men earn. So I understand that sense of scarcity, but I'd love to see women empowering each other more.
That football analogy is a really interesting one. In your TED Talk with your son, Jonathan, you say that it's hard to believe in God when your soul is in the wrong body. Growing up in the evangelical church and struggling with your gender identity, how was your faith impacted by your gender transition?
I think for me, it has become vibrant and alive in ways it never was before. I think the primary purpose of faith in our civilization, or really in our species, is to try to seek out the meaning of life together. I mean, we came together in spiritual communities years ago because we were searching for meaning. And I think it's so much easier to do that when you're in the body that feels right to you.
You're now the pastor of the Left Hand Church in Colorado, but a few years ago you were fired as CEO of the church planting organization, the Orchard Group, after you came out as a transgender woman. What does your new role mean to you, and what are your goals as pastor and member of the LGBTQ community?
I think one of the things we want to do is support particularly LGBTQ youth, because this is a difficult time for them. And I think we want to support the entire community's desire to come together instead of the kind of polarization we're seeing develop in the United States right now.
What's your advice for people who might be struggling with their gender identity or gender transition, and especially as it relates to the existence of God?
You know, I think people need to understand that who they are is, in fact, who they are. And if there is a God, that particular God is definitely supportive of the fact that they are who they are. I believe the call toward authenticity is sacred and holy and for the greater good. So I think it's important for us to answer that call to who we are, even if it means there's going to be a lot of loss. And for me, there was a lot of loss.
And yet you're able to still say that with a smile. On the flip side, do you have advice for family or friends of people who are grappling with gender identity, who perhaps don't quite understand someone else's truth, who would also turn to God to say, well, God put you in the body you were meant to be in?
Well, I think if that's the case, then God made a lot of mistakes in the world, because there are a lot of people whose bodies are not particularly helpful to them. So I think that is, in fact, a particular fundamentalist perspective on God. I believe that, in fact, one of the best things we can do is to just listen to our family members who might be dealing with gender dysphoria, which is what they call being transgender, or with being gender non-binary. Listen and ask. It's all right to make mistakes. It's all right to use the wrong pronouns. It's all right to get it wrong. We're only 0.58% of the population. Not that many people know one of us. And most of us are pretty generous, particularly those of us who've had a life of privilege before we transition. I think those of us who were powerful white males feel a special responsibility to be willing to be out there in the public and telling our stories.
Dr. Paula Stone Williams, we thank you so much for your time tonight. As a woman, what I learned about power, sex, and the patriarchy after I transitioned is available wherever books are sold.
Thank you so much.
And that is our show for tonight. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more America